Welcome, everyone. Today is World Children's Day, and we celebrate today the 29th anniversary of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I'm now with very special guests next to me, broadcasting directly from the European Parliament studios in Brussels. And we're here to debate some of the main concerns and impressions of European children that they have about the society we live in and their concerns for the future. The discussions will be based on a joint survey that was carried out by UNICEF and Eurochild, which was developed by children and children's experts, and it was launched in June this year. We gathered over 14,000 answers from children from all over Europe, from 23 countries, more than 38,000 answers, responses to the topics on school safety, family environment, climate change, and the online behavior. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our participants. From the European Parliament, on my left-hand side, here is Mrs. Jean Lambert. She's Vice Chair of the European Parliament Intergroup on Children's Rights. She's also coordinator for her group, the Green Party, in the Employment Committee of the European Parliament. On my right-hand side, I have Mr. Charles Goerens. He's a member of the Human Rights Committee, the subcommittee, and also of the Development Committee in the European Parliament. And you're from the Alliance of Liberals and Democratic Group. Welcome, Mr. Goerens. Then from Cyprus, we have our first voice of the youth, Sean, on my right-hand side. And the second young voice here is from Johanna. Sorry, from Ireland. I'm sorry, apologies. From Ireland we have Sean, and from Cyprus we have Johanna. Very much welcome to this debate. So the debate will be quite simple. I'm going to facilitate the conversation, and the young people are going to ask you questions. And each person, I hope you will all be able to answer this in a conscious way as possible. So, Johanna, I would like to give you first the floor.
Thanks a lot. I'm really pleased to participate in this debate. It's a great opportunity for us to hear from those who work on such big issues and for us to be heard. My first question is to Mr. Goerens. You're active on the topic of children's rights in migration and in the world. So the UNICEF Eurochild survey reveals that 2/3 of children and young people are feeling positive about immigrants moving to their countries. So why are kids so open to diversity and oftentimes adults aren't?
Well, that's on the one hand good news, on the other hand bad news, because 2/3 of children are rather positive vis-à-vis immigration. That's positive. That means that 1/3 is not positive or quite indifferent. We must convince people that it's important to accept diversity because diversity is in everybody's interest. Why are 2/3 of children positive? I guess it's due to the fact that children are not shaped by economic or political standards. They are still open-minded. They are discovering the world. And that's very interesting, that's fascinating, and I think this dynamics is at the origin of this positive feeling.
Okay, it's a very important question and a very interesting viewpoint shared. Thank you, Mr. Goerens. Now, Sean, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you. I'm also very glad to be part of this debate here at the European Parliament. My question is for MEP Jean Lambert. The Eurokids 1 survey shows that children and young people are quite worried about climate change that will affect our lives. It is among top 3 concerns for the future. Do you think the European Union is paying enough attention to this, or do politicians have different views from children?
Well, I think young people are really quite right to be very worried about the impact that climate change is having now, as well as into the future. And I think, if you're looking at the recent reports from the UN panel on climate change, that's really a wake-up call. And so to see movements in some countries like Extinction Rebellion getting underway with people saying, look, we're fed up waiting, we need to do more, is really important. For the European Union, I think it's taken seriously. I think that, that there are quite a lot of very solid policies around, that if you look at what the proposals are for the cohesion funds for the European Union, what we pay, the European Social Fund and regional development, that 20% of that over the last 6-7 years has had to go for climate change related things. The proposal for the next budget is 25%. And there's a lot there on, circular economy, renewable energies. Is it enough? Well, I'm from the Greens. I'm going to tell you that it's not enough, and that we need to be doing much more, for example, to stop investing in fossil fuels and really to switch that money to renewables, and to make sure that what we're doing is really integrated as part of our policy and not something that sits sort of in the Environment Committee or somewhere else. It runs across every area of policy, and we're still not good at integrating that. And some national governments, are really, what's the polite way to put it? I think some national governments are more rubbish than others at doing that. So it's also, how the national governments really get in tune with this too.
Okay, thank you. Another great issue, and thank you for your viewpoint, because I think our planet really needs adults that listen more to young people when it comes to climate change, and also because they're the ones inheriting the problem when they grow up and get older. Now, I just would like to throw another statistic before the next question, still focusing on the main concerns of children and young people on their future. Listen to this. The joint UNICEF Eurochild survey revealed that 53% of children and young people are quite worried about being able to find a job when they finish school. And I wonder what is behind this fear. So, Johanna, please, could you ask the next question?
Thanks. My next question goes to MEP Jean Lambert, and it's actually related to what you've just highlighted. The survey shows that 74% of children and young people who participated think schools are not preparing them well enough for the future, and that, of course, causes insecure about employment. So how can the European Union help with this and make sure that all European Union countries improve the quality of education and offer skills that are relevant for our world? And Mr. Lambert, I read that you were a teacher before you were elected for the European Parliament. So what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, you're right. I was a teacher before I came here, secondary school level. And I think this is something that was the case many years ago when I was doing that, and people still feel it now. I mean, of course, the European Union has limited what we call competencies in terms of education. That's very much, what member states do. They organise it themselves, so a lot of it is with them. But obviously, there are ways in which we try and share expertise for a start. That from the Employment and Social Affairs Committee that I'm on, we've been doing a lot of work recently on issues around skills and skills preparedness, skills matching. So we've been looking at the education system, so as a Culture and Education Committee here, and we try and put people in touch with what's happening in other member states, so they can see that, look, Finland seems to be doing really well, high level of skilled people, graduates. Why is that? What is it that's special about their education system? What can we learn about Germany's education system that, doesn't dismiss skilled tradesmen, skilled craftsmen? Some of our member states, the idea that you get your hands dirty is seen as second-class work. In Germany, that's not the case. So some of it is about that exchange. Also, the investment that we put into skills through things such as the social fund, which really helps member states to concentrate perhaps on less on the people who, if you like, are the more obvious sort of school to university to whatever, but maybe those that have dropped out of school, are less qualified, to really try and help those people into the labour market. So there's things that we do there. There are now skills programmes going on that the Commission's working on, for example, on one of them with renewable energies that I'm particularly interested in. They're looking also at textiles, at various skills sectors, about what can be done there to improve the level of education, improve that level of skills. But it's not just about skills now, it's also about, do people have the basics? Are they literate? Are they numerate? Are they digitally skilled? You know, do they have languages? Do they have those core skills that whatever happens in your working life means you've got a sound base that you can move from?
As a Cypriot student, I can comment on the Cypriot education system, which is okay, but I think that when we are talking about education, okay, is not good enough. So there are being tries in order to improve the education system, and we have the Cyprus Children Parliament, which I'm a member of, and we had the chance to speak with politicians and ministers in Cyprus about different topics such as education, and I'm really glad to say that I saw that our comments have taken into consideration, and now we're all trying together to improve the quality of our education. So I believe that in matters such as education, which affect us immediately, the children, we should all have a say on it. So, yeah.
No, I think it's really important to actually hear the voices of those who are in the education system.
Yeah.
That a lot of the emphasis goes on what do employers want, what do your parents want, what do teachers want, and the people who get left out are the ones that are actually sitting, you know, in the room, supposedly developing an education. So how that works and how you see it, I think that dynamic is really important, and that would be good practice that all member states could learn from.
Yeah, that's why I'm
so
telling you.
this is, you know, this is something that can be put into the mix. Events like, you know, what's happening here today also help. And I think, you know, we need to be building that in much more. And it's one of the things that we try to do here, you know, in the all-party group on children's rights, is to actually try and improve our listening skills as politicians, you know.
Well, that's really good to hear, and also to hear from your experience, Jana, in Cyprus. Mr. Gerrans, do you have anything to add to this?
Yes, I would like to stress that the European Union is far from being a social union. We have too less social standards laid down in our treaty, but that was not the reason for the European Union to keep inactive. The opposite was true. A few years ago, the European Union launched an initiative called European Youth Initiative. That means that all the member states of the European Union agreed on having a kind of initiative in their member states in order to provide work to young people. If that was not the case, they had to offer a new learning process, new efforts should have been done in this regard. And that's a good initiative. And we have 28 action plans through the European Union. And, well, I think we have already got some positive results. But unfortunately, the European Union has a lack of solidarity among member states. If you take, for instance, the economic crisis in Greece, the most suffering people were young people. People in schooling age or people in the age of being ready for the labor market. Unfortunately, due to the austerity, which was a very strong one in Greece, people didn't find a job. And that must be, we have to overcome this situation by providing more funds to Greece on the one hand. Of course, they have to agree on reforms. But they could not do it on their own because it was so difficult, and the difficulties were so important that it was quite impossible to overcome this situation in a short term. And that's the reason why we have to reflect on the future of Europe. Once the United Kingdom has left the European Union, that will be the case the 29th of March 2019. The European Union will have a new meeting in Sibiu, Romania, in order to see what should be done in the future, in order to have to be better prepared, in particular for young people, to find their way. We have to tackle with a difficult impact of the globalization on the EU. We know globalization can be positive in certain sense, but not automatically. We have to adapt our social system, our economic system, in order to provide more opportunities to young people.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gurns. It's also a very interesting point of view and important to share that. I would like to move on to the next round of questions, and you already touched a little bit on what Sean is going to ask now.
Thank you. I live in Monaghan, Ireland, and the border is in fact visible from my house. So as we are joined by MEP Lambert here representing the UK, I'd like to know how are you representing the views of children in negotiations that are taking place in Brexit?
I think that in many ways it's children and young people that have been really quite left out of a lot of this decision making, partly because, of course, in the referendum it was only those over 18 at the time that were able to vote, not 16-year-olds. And you can see from the referendum results a generational difference in the way in which people looked at their future together with the European Union. So I think that the voices are there. They're there in organisations, sort of Our Future, Our Choice, various of the student bodies and so on, but they're certainly not structured in any sort of way to the national government that I can see. I mean, I'm in the European Parliament, not in Westminster, which I'm very grateful at this point, I think. But, I think business has been listened to. Well, they would argue they're not being listened to properly. A lot of people aren't within this. It's becoming an internal battle for certain parties. So I think that we need to do more to make sure that young people's voices are heard in this, and that young people also need to be shouting, certainly from the UK side of it, to their members of the national parliament, into the government, to actually make the point that it's your future. A lot of those that voted to leave, won't be around probably to see the full consequences of that. And I think it's really worrying that we're not looking enough at. I mean, you will gather I'm a convinced Remainer, yeah?
Yes.
And I think that what we have done in terms of reducing the opportunities for young people is really shocking. And therefore, in whatever is happening next, whether the future agreement with the European Union, we need to be very, very clear that opportunities on education, on travel, all of those interlinking, all of those connections, we try and make sure we keep as many of those as possible. We can't, we're not there to be a little sort of closed off island.
And how will Brexit affect foreign students who want to study a third level in the UK?
I think most things that unfortunately still in terms of that future relationship between the UK and the European Union are still very unclear, very undefined. I think, for the children, young people who want to study there, who've already started their studies or will start during the transition period, they have assurances from the government that they will be able to see their course through, to finish that, to have the qualifications, which of course at the moment most of those, certainly university qualifications, are recognised, and we would want to, I would hope, try and make sure that we continue to do recognition of qualifications both ways. It's something that from the Employment Committee we've been saying the European Union needs to do more on recognising third country qualifications, so they could start by making sure there's a continuity with the UK, providing the UK is sensible enough to want to do that. For what happens after that, for people who have not started during the transition period, it really looks as if the government could be thinking about treating those as third country nationals for the UK, with all of what that means for student fees, which are horrendous. And I think that, this is something that the government, well, it needs to be looking at fees anyway. You shouldn't be starting young people's lives with mountains of debt, but also to try and make sure that we can keep those doors open and that knowledge circulating. The UK benefits enormously from EU research programmes. And the idea that we're actually going to cut ourselves off from that, make ourselves less important in the world of research, future jobs, all of what you were saying,
Yeah.
totally
Okay.
unwise.
Okay, thank you for
May I
that.
just add one word to that? As you know, there was a demonstration, pro-European demonstration in London a few months ago. I have never seen 700 people, most of them young people, gathering in Brussels, in France, in Paris, in Athens, in Berlin, asking for more Europe. Underlining, giving emphasis to the importance of respecting human rights, fundamental values. The most convinced Europeans are among the young British people nowadays. It's a lesson we learn at your expense. And Brexit is in nobody's interest. It's a lose-lose situation for everybody, for the European Union as well as for the United Kingdom.
And I think if we're looking at, as you were saying, that what people can be learning from each other at the moment, one of the things is that, as we in the UK can see what we're losing, other people need to make sure that, all the criticisms you might have of the European Union, and a lot of them are quite justified, you just heard my colleague talking about some of them, it still remains an extremely important body on the world stage, and that what we gain from it is enormous. And when you're criticising, please don't forget to tell people why it matters, and that the criticism is to make it better, not to destroy it, I would hope.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I think, Johanna, you wanted to...
My next question is for Mr. Gerrans. We have learned and enjoyed discussing ideas with MEPs over the past 2 days. How can the European Parliament help us get our views out? Shouldn't it be more open to children and young people beyond the World Children's Day?
Well, I must say, first of all, above all, that the European Parliament is an open house. You can come in, you can inform yourself in the committees. Everybody can reach or meet people here. Committee meetings are open. Most of them are web streamed. You have a lot of informations at your disposal. And of course you can contact your MEP. Coming from Cyprus, it's not very difficult. I am also from a small country. The opportunities to meet an MEP are given in a smaller country. In the United Kingdom, in France, in Germany, is more difficult. But nevertheless, let's seize this opportunity and the close relationship with an MEP. MEPs can also come to school and have an exchange of views with young people. I expect young people expressing themselves on their own future. That's very important to us.
Thank you very much. I think actually our time is almost finished, and I hope that these ideas that we have been discussing here today